Hey everyone, it's Allie, and well, today I'm going to show you a very silly strategy. This is straight up one of the best strategies I've ever done in Path of Exile in a very long time, and I think the results can speak for themselves. Today, we're going to be discussing a strategy that's going to be reminiscent of the old Div Card farming days in Crimson Temple, except in this strategy, we're not going to be farming any specific card, but we're going to basically be farming every Div Card in the game at the same time. In this strategy, we are going to be generating a mass amount of Div Cards, which are then going to get duplicated, stolen by the boss, and then when you kill the boss, they're going to get duplicated one more time, giving you quadruple drops of every Div Card that's found in your map. When we want to boil down what we're doing in terms of stack decks, this strategy is going to be the equivalent, at a low budget, of you opening about 11,000 stack decks per hour, and at a higher budget, somewhere around probably 25 to 30,000 stack decks per hour. The point is, you're getting quite a lot of random Div Cards, and well, when you're just getting that many, you're guaranteed to get something good, and once you do, you just quadruple it and become very rich. The nice thing in the strategy is that cards such as Divine Beauty and Fortunate are super common, meaning that pretty much every map that we do, unless you get super unlucky, you pretty much either break even or profit tremendously. Over time, this is probably somewhere around 20 div an hour or so at a low budget, and if you were to put more and more money into this strategy, well, the money becomes very silly. The fun thing is that div per hour ratio does not even include things such as House of Mirrors, all the other mirror cards, Nimbus cards, or any of the other super expensive div cards because, well, even without them, you're bankrolling yourself just for the raw div card drops that are going to happen. So, with all that said, why don't we start talking about the strategy and, well, get you on your way of basically crashing your game every single time you kill a map boss. Now, before we go any further, I need to specifically put a disclaimer in here that you need a very end game setup to be able to do this strategy. While we're going to be doing a tier 5 boss, that tier 5 boss is going to be as difficult, if not more difficult, than T17 bosses, and basically no build in the game, especially if you high roll a map hard enough, is tanky enough to not get one shot by this thing. The more damage you have, the better. If you have a pretty tanky setup, it's going to be pretty nice as well, as Strongbox themselves are going to hurt, but no matter what, you're not going to do this on a 5 div budget setup. At the same time, the idle setup itself is going to be very expensive, requiring you to have at a minimum 60, 80, maybe even 100 div to realistically get you going. Do not attempt to do this without having everything you need, because you're spending 2 div a map, and if you do not have the proper idle setup, you are just going to lose all of your money or barely break even. So with that disclaimer out of the way, let's start discussing exactly how this is going to work. Now, this strategy is pretty simple. All we're going to be doing is running 3 specific idols. First, we're going to need one 3x1 idol. You specifically need the tall one. Do not get a long one, as that will break your idol setup. That is going to have divination cards from Strongboxes in your map are duplicated. What you can do to make this better in the future is to eventually upgrade into an increased effect of explicit modifiers on your map's idol, and eventually tier yourself a 3 mod idol with 1 additional Strongbox on it as well. This is then going to, well, dupe every single div card that you come across, which then will get sucked by the boss and duplicated even further by the pilfering scarab. Next, you're going to need to get yourself 4 2x2 idols. This is where the expensive portion of the strategy is going to come in, as the 2 mods that we need on these idols are basically non-negotiable, and if you don't have either, you're making substantially less money. First, on every idol, you're going to need increased effect of explicit modifiers on your maps per explicit modifier. In total, we would ideally want to get ourselves 4 of them with 3% roll on each, meaning for every modifier we have on our map, all modifiers are 12% higher. This 12% higher then means you get more pack size, more quantity, and overall your maps are going to be juicier. You cannot skip out on this, and this is the bread and butter of where all of the juicing in the strategy is going to come from that allows you to get these big loot explosions. To add on to that, you also need Strongboxes open your maps have a chance to be openable again. Just a 5% base chance is more than good enough, as 9% with 3% explicit modifiers are several hundred div by themselves. What you can do to make this better in the future is to then eventually upgrade these to increase effective explicit modifiers per 5% map quantity. That is something that you could worry about once you've started doing the strategy a little bit and have made yourself some money. The only other thing you're going to need is going to be for one of your idols to have Strongboxes in your maps are at least rare. This is pretty important for your map sustain, and without this, you're going to have a pretty bad time. Not only that, but it also gives you more Divine Beauty drops, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit, so please don't skip out on this. For the idol, where you are going to get the Strongbox their rare mod, all you really need to look for is just increased explicit modifiers per explicit modifier, as well anything else on here is extremely expensive. Finally, all we're going to need is to grab ourselves a singular focus, and ideally you want to make sure it's a max rolled singular focus, followed by as many small 1x1 idols that have Strongbox in your maps have an increased chance to be a diviner Strongbox. You want this to be as close to 70 as possible, as this is where all the profit in the strategy is going to come from. Ideally, you're also going to look for more monster packs consisting of difficult and rewarding monsters, as this will then give you overall more total packs of monsters in your map, which then overall give you more Divine Beauty drops, which are going to be a pretty pretty large portion of your consistent baseline profit. Don't try to find yourself a 5% roll for the packs of difficult and rewarding monsters. When it comes to 1x1 idols, you're specifically looking to get as high of a diviner chance as possible, and then if you can't afford it, to get yourself a higher roll on the difficult and rewarding monsters, but that is a secondary priority in comparison to diviners. With this, that's all you really need to be able to start a strategy, which, well, is going to be very expensive, but it's going to be very lucrative very quickly. In terms of the scarabs that we're going to want to run for the strategy, it is a very specific setup where you need every portion of it for this to feel good. For ambush scarabs, we're going to specifically run hidden compartments for a 15% chance to be openable again. It's just important because that just gives us 15% more diviners. Potency for 75% increased effect, so we get more quant and more items dropping out of our diviners. Containment, which is going to turn every pack of monsters in your map into a Strongbox, which is what is going to allow us to generate all the Strongboxes we need for this. Discernment, as this is going to make it so your diviner chance is substantially higher. If you don't have this, you'll get maybe 2 or 3 diviners per map. If you have this, you'll get 10 to 15. And then finally, you're going to need pilfering, which is, well, the bread and butter of this whole strategy. This is going to steal every single div card that drops from your diviners, and they're going to be added to the boss and then duplicated once they drop. There is nothing you can do for these idols. There's no way for you to make these scarabs cheaper, and there's no corners that you can cut. You specifically need these 5 idols to get this going, and there's no way around it. So once you got all of your idols and once you got all of your scarabs, it's time to start the strategy, right? No, wrong. What you need to do before you're allowed to start a strategy is you have to go and scry Underground Sea over to Atoll. Underground Sea has a Divine Beauty card as a core drop of it, and we need to go and do Underground Seas until we get Nameless Seer to allow us to scry Underground Sea over to Atoll to add Divine Beauty into Atoll's drop table. If you do not do this, you're going to lose somewhere around 20 to 30% of your consistent profits per hour, as the Divine Beauties are very important to the strategy. What I would recommend for you to do to get yourself the Nameless Seer and Underground Sea faster is to remove all idols from your map device, to get yourself a bunch of T16 Underground Seas, as this has to be done in T16. Scour every single one of them. Don't alch them. Don't chisel them. Just run white T16 maps with nothing special on them. And then put Maven Influence so you get less monsters. And then don't put any mechanics, any scarabs, any map device option. You are just straight up running a white tier 16 map with nothing extra on it. What you're then going to do in these Underground Seas is you're just going to run around and clear as much of it as fast as you can. Just kill everything in the map. Be as efficient as you can, and honestly prioritize more maps per hour than making sure you kill every single monster. On average, it should take you somewhere around 50 to 100 maps or so, depending on your luck, to see a Nameless Seer. And again, please do not attempt to skip out on this, as you really are going to need this for the strategy. Once you've done that, we are ready to start talking about the strategy itself. Now, what we need to go over first are going to be the maps they're going to run, as they are very specific and you have to get them yourself. For the strategy, we are specifically running tier 5 atolls that are specifically qualityed to 20% and are A-mod maps. The reason we need to do this on Atoll is because we are going to be adding thousands of div cards onto the boss itself. Pilfering makes it so the boss gains 5% toughness and 1% increased damage per card that it has on it. Normally, the boss in Atoll has 5 million health in a T16 map, with about 1,000 or so cards on it, and with 5,000% increased toughness, along with any sort of map mod, given you're going to have over 100% map modifier effect, you're going to very quickly get that boss to billions upon billions of health. Now, ideally, if you could handle that, you should do this on T16s, because you can then get yourself T17 map drops, which gives you a few extra div per hour. But realistically, for 99.9% of people attempting to do this strategy, you're going to have to do it in T5, because on T5, the boss has 10 times less health than it does in T16. With this, it'll be a lot easier to deal with, but the boss is still going to have several hundred millions of health in whatever map that you do. The reason we need it to be an 8-mod map specifically is because all of our juicing in strategy, again, is coming from the increased effect of explicit modifiers on your maps per explicit modifier on your 2x2 idols. Later on, like I said, we're going to want to grab ourselves double explicit modifier from both map mods and from map quality, and just the quality alone in general is going to give you quite a lot of extra loot. The way we're going to go about generating these is pretty simple. To get you going, to start the strategy, I would recommend just go buy some random T5 maps, remove all of your watch zones, and simply orb or horizon them into tier 5 atolls. Once you've done that, all you're going to do is simply chisel all of them. They don't need to be alked, they don't need to be scoured, you don't need to do anything, just simply chisel them, because a white map is now guaranteed to go 20% quality with one chisel, and then vol every single one of them. You now have a 1 in 4 chance for your map to become a 8-mod map, and all you're going to do is just shove them all into a tab, chisel them, vol them, and then simply use a regix with at least 90% quant on them, as normal 6-mod maps cannot reach 90% quant normally. With this, you simply just take out everything that's highlighted, and that's your set of maps to be able to run the strategy. What you need to do for a strategy is you need to have every single one of your favorited slots unlocked and set to Atoll, as well as having all of your watch zones removed from your atlas and put in the little holder. And then you need to specifically run a max rolled singular focus. And with that setup, you're going to get more than enough T5 atolls to drop while you're doing the strategy to then just chisel Fizzle and Vol to get yourself more 8-mod maps later on. Now, dependent on how difficult of a regex that you need your build to pass through to be able to run the maps, you might want to potentially include a 1x1 idol that has both Diviner and Cartographer Strongbox chance on it. These are going to be a lot more expensive, but even just a singular Cartographer role is going to basically double the amount of maps that you get, hopefully potentially make it a little bit easier for you to do this on your specific build. Do not go past 1, because the more Cartographer chance that you get, the less Diviners you're going to get, but I found that 1 by itself doesn't necessarily impact it too much, and you're not really losing that much money. If you really need a second one, then sure, get a second one, but ideally, you should only need 1, if even that. This is a tier 5 map after all, so don't try to regex for things such as Fizz is extra. It's not going to matter. The only difficult thing is the boss, and the boss only does cold damage, and only regex for things that straight up do not allow you to do the map with your build. For me, in my case, as a life-sacking BV, I am simply regexing for no leech, no regen, and reduce recovery, as those are the 3 stats that make it so my build literally doesn't work, and then I run every single other mod. Now, for the low effort version of the strategy, all you're doing is just clicking on every single box. You're not really thinking, you're just clicking, you're doing the box, and then you're moving on to the next one. What I recommend for you to do instead of doing that is to the high effort version of the strategy, where we roll every single diviners that we come across. This is going to require a lot more clicks, and it's going to probably double your total map time, but it's going to more than double the total loot that you get, while at the same time keeping the price per map consistent, meaning you're just getting double the loot for effectively half the price. What we're going to do is we're going to walk up to every diviner, and then we're going to wisdom scroll it, we're going to scour it, we're going to use 4 engineering orbs to get to 20% quality. We're then going to alchemy it, and then we're going to chaos roll it until we hit increased quantity of items found inside. Now, at a extremely higher end budget, which we'll most likely do a second follow-up video for, you're going to also want to X-slam it for drops additional items. But at a bare minimum, all you're doing is just simply chaos rolling until you get yourself at least 80% increased quantity of items. This stat is going to by far generate you the largest amount of Div Cards. And until you get to a much, much higher budget level, it's going to be very important to increasing your total loot. Now, if you get things on here such as contains additional div cards with currency, or if you get drop additional items, that's great. That's going to be a lot more money. But at a minimum, you're just simply looking for quant. It's going to take a little bit of extra effort, but in my opinion, it is highly worth it to do so, given the amount of extra currency you're making. As for your inventory setup to do this, what I'd recommend for you to do is to bring a stack of alchemies, a stack of scours, 60 engineering orbs, and 60 chaos orbs with you in every map. This should basically take care of the majority of maps that you come across, and the only time you're going to need more than that is if you get an exceptionally high roll on the amount of diviners that you see. That shouldn't happen very often. This should only take you a few extra minutes once you get used to doing it. Once you do get to the boss, you do need to understand that the boss is going to straight up delete you. And it might be a T5 map boss, but you have to respect it, because this T5 map boss is literally harder than basically every other boss in the game. Due to each card giving it 1% increased damage, it's going to have several 1000% increased damage if you get yourself a pretty average map, and well, it's going to hurt quite a lot. Do your best to dodge everything that does, and realistically, as long as you're walking a circle around it and dodging all the frost bolts that does, all you have to do is simply run out when it does the white charging effect to do the ice nova, and then just simply come back in and finish it up. If you're playing a headhunter build, this strategy is a lot easier, as you could probably fairly easily ramp up your headhunter throughout the rest of the map and just one-tap the boss. But if you're not, you're going to have to exercise some caution. Once you do kill it, you're going to get a giant loot explosion, and you just simply collect it and move on to the next map. Now, in terms of loots, oh boy, there is a lot to say here as well. You're going to get yourself quite a lot of loot. What you're seeing here is the loots from about 15 or so maps. I don't have every single bit of loots that I've gotten across the strategy, given that I need to constantly resell some of my drops, then be able to afford more scarabs through the strategy. But well, the loot pays for itself really, really easily. For example, I have 100 fortunates, and I have 400 hoarders. Now, this is from 40 to 50 maps or so, as I just haven't bothered turning my hoarders in. But, well, our loot is just amazing. If you simply just want to look at the divine cards on their own, I got a full Seraphots, I got myself a lot of fortunates, and I got myself almost 3 full divine beauties to turn in. These divine beauties are never going to be quadrupled, because these are specifically dropping from the monsters themselves that you kill from the boxes, and not from the boxes themselves. But these divine beauties are a very, very large portion of your total profits. Just in my inventory alone, this is what, somewhere around 50 or so divine orbs, which I got in about 12 or so maps, meaning that by itself, this pays for all my scarab costs, and literally everything else in here is just pure profit. Now, some of the things I need to make you aware of are some of the div cards that you really should be picking up, as they're going to pretty massively boost your profit. Obviously, you're going to get yourself quite a lot of random div cards, such as Desecrated Virtue, or Gemcutter's Mercy, or Homes, or Icy Brothers, or Brother Stashes, or lots of other different high-end cards. But while those are nice to get, and they're a nice little bit of currency, what you're going to need to be aware of, and you're going to need to make sure these are on your filter, and you're going to want to do everything you can to pick up all of them, as these are going to be a pretty large chunk of your total consistent profit, are to be More Is Never Enough, Chaotic Disposition, and the Wrath. These cards drop so often that by themselves, they're equivalent to somewhere around 1.5 to 2 div per map that you do. Now, you might be saying to yourself, Allie, I do not want to turn in hundreds upon hundreds of chaotic disposition to make the strategy work. And well, luckily for you, you do not have to. All we're going to do with those cards is we're simply just going to sell them on the auction house. For example, chaotic disposition is something that people will buy en masse. At this point, I've sold several thousand chaotic dispositions fairly quickly. All you're going to do is simply just put them up for sale, and well, as you can see right now, there's somebody buying all of them for 4 chaos each, meaning you are getting yourself the majority of the profit without you having to do anything. All you do is simply just shove them up on here for the correct price, and well, just like that, in 1 second, I sold every chaotic disposition I have. For the More Is Never Enough, which are going to stockpile to a pretty large extent, while there's typically people buying them, if you simply just leave it overnight at a ratio of 3 cards per 1 chaos that you sell it for, so for example, 3,000 cards to 1,000 chaos, these will sell very quickly, as over time, if you open up More Is Never Enough at a large enough ratio, you will make quite a lot of profit. The same can be said about the Wrath, where you will most likely have people ready to instantaneously buy them. But if you simply just sell them at a ratio of 1 chaos each, meaning you are losing a little bit of money, they will pretty much sell instantaneously. And if not instantaneously, they will sell over the course of a few hours, meaning you'll get your money out of these very, very quickly. Outside of that, the rest of the div cards are up to you to decide what you want to do with. Personally, I've been pretty much opening the majority of them, both for fun, and given that currently most div cards don't really get purchased, but the rewards for them will. For example, things such as Gemcutter's Mercy, which gives you any of the exceptional gems, you can just simply turn them in and do a little bit of gambling if you were to get Enlightens or Empowers or Enhance, and just sell those directly. And ideally, you would save all your div card ones and just turn them in yourself for a lot of currency rather than selling them on the auction house. But if you do need a little bit of instantaneous money, you can sell things like your Divine Beauties or your Seraphots. Overall, this strategy is pretty simplistic at its core. Again, I would recommend you do the higher effort version of the strategy, because it's going to make substantially more money. But even just simply doing the click all the boxes version of it is going to make you a stupid amount of currency. The only barrier to entry here is just the high cost to get in. But again, the amount of money the strategy makes you kind of makes sense on why the barrier to entry is so high. Overall, your profits should be somewhere around 20 to 25 div an hour consistently if you are manually rolling every single box, and probably somewhere around 10 to 12 or so div an hour if you simply just click on every box and don't bother rolling. Now, unfortunately, I've been pretty unlucky so far, and there's been quite a lot of people farming the strategy along with me, and I've personally seen quite a lot of House of Mirrors drop for other people, and I've gotten pretty unlucky to where all I've personally gotten have been 8 sets of Icy Brothers, which, while they're worth a little bit of money, they're not as expensive as something like a House of Mirror. From a few people who have been doing the strategy for a few days now, they have said that if you are being efficient and if you do have some pretty high-end idols, you can see a House of Mirror pretty much every day to 2 days, meaning that, well, once you do hit it, your div per hour gets massively inflated. Now, you shouldn't expect to see a House of Mirrors, but if you do the strategy for, let's say, half a week, well, you're pretty much guaranteed to get one, given you're opening 10,000 stack decks per hour. At that rate, you're pretty much all but guaranteed to get almost every single card in the game at some point, assuming you're doing hundreds upon hundreds of these maps. And well, as soon as you get yourself a House of Mirrors, for example, you're going to get 4 of them, meaning you just make 400 div out of thin air. It's a very fun strategy, and it's been something that's given me a stupid amount of money so far, and I've had an absolutely great time with it. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment in the comments below, and I'd be more than happy to help you as soon as I can. I also stream on Twitch every single day, so feel free to come by Twitch to either see the strategy for yourself or to ask me any questions, or if you simply just want to come by and hang out with the other kitties and be a part of our community, I'd be more than happy to see you there as well. With all that said, kitties, if you end up doing a strategy, I hope you have fun. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you all in the next video.